My name is Eleanor Rivera. I'm 65. That morning, the world still felt steady coffee brewing, sunlight breaking through the lace curtains, the sound of gulls echoing faintly from the Savannah River. I had the same quiet routine every day since retiring from the library. 1 cup of black coffee, a slice of toast, and a few minutes scrolling through Facebook to see photos of old colleagues or my former students. The phone slipped from my hands before I even realized I'd stopped breathing. The image on the screen was clear, too bright to deny. Lila stood in a white dress, her brown hair swept up, bouquet pressed to her chest. Beside her was a man I knew only from hurried introductions, Ryan, and behind them, his parents, elegant and smiling as though the world belonged to them. The caption read, "Our perfect day. Family complete." I whispered the words to myself, family complete. I picked up the phone again, my fingers trembling, and looked closer, searching for something that wasn't there. My face, my name, any trace that I existed in that moment. There was none. No tag, no comment, not even a mention in the flood of congratulations. My throat tightened. I set the phone down carefully, afraid that if I held it any longer, it might burn. The coffee had gone cold. For years, I'd imagined her wedding day standing beside her as she walked down the aisle, straightening her veil, hearing her whisper, "Thank you, Mom," one last time before stepping forward. I used to joke that I'd cry so hard the photographer would run out of tissues. It was supposed to be our day, too, in some small way. I stared at the photo until my eyes blurred. It wasn't the surprise of the marriage itself that hurt. It was the way everything in that frame told me I no longer belonged in her story. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked, and the sound broke whatever spell had frozen me. I rose, poured the coffee down the sink, and leaned on the counter until the trembling stopped. For a moment, I thought about calling her, but I didn't. The thought of hearing her cheerful voice pretending nothing had happened was more than I could take. The house felt too quiet, as if it too had just learned it was no longer part of the family. By the time the sun climbed high over the river, the photo was still open on my phone. I pressed my thumb against the screen and deleted it, watching the image fade away. The kitchen clock ticked on, steady and unbothered, as if life would keep moving whether I was invited to it or not. After the photo, I sat at the kitchen table until the morning light turned harsh and flat. The silence pressed in like humidity before a storm, and I did what I've always done when something hurts too much. I started to remember. When my husband, Daniel, died. Lila was only 10, the night of the funeral. She fell asleep, clutching the hem of my black dress. I promised her that nothing in the world would ever take me away, that she would have everything she needed. I didn't know then how much that promise would cost. For years, I worked mornings at the public library and evenings tutoring high school students. I'd come home smelling of dust and old paper, my hands stained with ink, my legs aching from standing all day. Some nights, I fell asleep grading their essays, the lamp still on, the sound of Lila's soft breathing from the next room reminding me why it was worth it. There were months when the refrigerator looked emptier than it should have. I'd skip dinner, claiming I wasn't hungry, just to make sure Lila had enough. On weekends, I sewed curtains for neighbors and baked pies for church fundraisers. Every extra dollar went into a small envelope marked Lila's future. When she got accepted to the University of Georgia, I cried so hard I couldn't finish reading the letter aloud. We celebrated with takeout Chinese and a single candle stuck into a slice of pound cake. She kissed my cheek and said, "You're the reason this is happening, Mom." I believed her in those years. I dreamed of her wedding, like people dream of spring after a long winter. I'd picture her walking down the aisle in lace, Daniel's photograph tucked in my purse, the two of us holding hands before she stepped toward her new life. That image carried me through exhaustion, loneliness, and years of living paycheck to paycheck. But sitting in that same kitchen, staring at the empty chair across from me. Those memories felt like ghosts, beautiful but useless. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, had been bricks in a house she no longer recognized as hers. I reached for the folder where I kept old receipts, college forms, and the faded photo of Lila in her graduation gown. Her smile in that picture used to make me proud. Now it just reminded me how far away she'd gone and how long I'd been standing still. I first met Ryan on a rainy Sunday in March. Lila had been seeing him for a few months but hadn't said much, just that he worked in real estate and came from a good family. I didn't know what that meant until I opened the door and saw the shine of his car in the driveway and the expensive umbrella he handed to her before stepping inside. He was polite, careful with his words, calling me ma'am as though I were a client. I served roast chicken and mashed potatoes, the way Lila liked when she was a girl. Ryan smiled, said everything was delicious, but his eyes kept drifting over the furniture secondhand pieces Daniel and I had collected over the years. I caught the faint hesitation in his voice when he complimented the house. And suddenly, I wanted to hide every chipped plate and faded curtain. After that dinner, something in Lila changed. She still called, but her tone was lighter, more practiced. Her visits became planned around his schedule. Mom, can we make it next weekend instead? Ryan's parents are taking us to Hilton Head. When she did stop by, she'd glance at her watch halfway through our coffee, saying she didn't want to keep them waiting. I understood she was trying to fit me between the life she had and the one she was building. But each visit left me smaller, like a page being slowly torn from a book. The first Christmas with Ryan's family. She sent me a photo of a dinner table lined with candles and fine china. No call, no invitation, just a picture. As if that could fill the space where her voice used to be. I smiled at the screen, told her it looked beautiful, then sat alone with a bowl of soup, pretending it was enough, in time. She stopped asking for advice and started offering it instead. Mom, you should get out more, she'd say. Take a trip, do something fun. She meant well, but the words stung. It was the tone people used with someone they pitied, somewhere along the way. I stopped being her home and became a place she only visited out of habit. That evening, I opened Facebook again, hoping maybe there'd been some mistake. Maybe I'd missed another photo, one that included me somehow, an old picture, a caption that explained it all. But there was nothing, just the same image, shared and reshared by people I didn't even know. The comments scrolled endlessly. Beautiful couple, perfect day. Such a lovely family. The word repeated like a drumbeat until it stopped sounding human. A woman from my church, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, wrote, "Didn't know your daughter got married. You must be so proud." I stared at her message for a long time before typing a simple heart emoji, then deleting it. Pride had nothing to do with what I felt. Each comment built a wall between me and the truth I didn't want to face. This wasn't a rushed decision or a misunderstanding. It had been planned, photographed, celebrated all without me. She hadn't forgotten. She had decided. I scrolled until the letters blurred and the phone's light burned my eyes. My hands shook as I pressed the delete button, watching my account vanish into a blank screen. It felt like erasing a part of myself that had been begging for inclusion, one post at a time. The kitchen clock ticked softly, marking the silence that followed. I sat there, surrounded by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the dim glow of the porch light outside. Somewhere in another house, my daughter was probably laughing, clinking glasses, calling her in-laws mom and dad without hesitation. I imagined her voice, bright and easy, belonging entirely to that new world, and for the first time in my life, I had nothing left to say. 2 days passed before I could bring myself to touch anything in the house. The silence had thickened into something physical, pressing against me from every wall. On the third morning, I opened the old cedar chest Daniel and I had used for storing papers. It still smelled faintly of lemon polish and thyme. Inside were folders, tax records, our marriage certificate, the insurance documents from the year he died. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe proof that my life had mattered somewhere on paper. Halfway through the stack, I found a thin envelope with Daniel's handwriting on the front. For Eleanor, keep safe. Inside was the property deed. I unfolded the document slowly, scanning the typewritten lines until I reached the bottom. The names stared back at me. Daniel Rivera and Eleanor Rivera, joint owners. The air seemed to shift. The house where Lila lived, the one she and Ryan had turned into their own, was still legally mine. My husband had bought it years ago, back when Lila was in college, to make sure she'd always have a place to come home to. After he passed, I'd let her move in, telling myself I wanted her to start her life freely. I'd never transferred the title. I'd simply forgotten. I sat back on the floor, the paper trembling in my hands. The realization didn't feel like triumph. It felt like remembering a truth I should have never let go of. That afternoon, I called Mark Denning, a friend from the library board who now practiced family law downtown. His voice was calm, steady, the kind people develop after years of watching others fall apart. Eleanor, he said when I finished explaining, you're not powerless. You just forgot you had power. He reviewed the documents, nodded, and handed them back to me neatly stacked. Do nothing in anger, he added. When people treat you small, stay lawful, stay calm. That's how you win without losing yourself. Driving home along the river, the sunset turned the water copper red. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to steady. The house keys in my purse jingled softly, a reminder that not everything I'd built could be taken from me. Some things, it turned out, were still mine. The next morning, the house felt different, lighter somehow, as if it had finally exhaled. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with Mark's words still echoing in my mind. You're not powerless. You just forgot you had power. That phrase stayed with me all day. Power, for me, had never meant control or punishment. It meant choice, the quiet right to decide what my life would look like. Even after everyone else had chosen for me, at noon, I drove downtown to Mark's office. The reception area smelled faintly of cedar and paper. When he asked what I wanted to do next, I surprised both of us with how steady my voice sounded. I'd like to update my will, I said. We spent an hour reviewing documents. I left half of everything to a local literacy fund for single mothers, and the other half to Lila, but only if she ever chose to write me a letter explaining why she had excluded me. No anger, no demand for apology, just truth. When the papers were signed, I walked to the riverfront, where the tide brushed gently against the docks. The world carried on quietly around me. Boats gliding past, a couple laughing over ice cream, gulls circling the water. I felt separate from it all, but not lonely. It was a calm kind of distance, the kind that doesn't ache. That evening, I opened my laptop, logged onto a rental site, and typed slowly 3-bedroom home in historic Savannah. Quiet neighborhood, shaded porch, newly refinished floors. I attached photos I'd taken years ago, before Lila moved in back when the house still looked like mine. When I clicked post listing, a strange calm settled over me. No anger, no thrill, just a steady pulse of certainty. I wasn't selling it. I wasn't erasing her memories. I was simply reclaiming a piece of my life that had been borrowed too long. As the sun sank behind the live oaks, I turned off the porch light and stood at the door a moment longer, listening to the quiet house breathe. For the first time, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. The for rent sign had only been up for 2 days when I heard the sharp knock on my front door. It wasn't the hesitant tap of a neighbor, it was fast, loud, and angry. When I opened it, Lila stood on the porch, her face flushed. Ryan just behind her, jaw set tight. "Mom," she said, her voice already trembling with fury. "What is this?" She pointed toward the photograph on her phone. My rental listing. The same pictures I'd posted online. I stepped aside and motioned for them to come in. The air between us felt charged, thick enough to touch. Ryan didn't wait for permission. "You're renting out the house," he said flatly. "Our house." I met his eyes. "Steady. The house your father bought. The one that's still in my name." Lila blinked, confused. "No, that's impossible. You gave it to me when I moved in, remember? I walked to the kitchen drawer, pulled out the envelope Mark had given back to me, and laid the deed gently on the table." Her eyes darted across the page, searching for her name. It wasn't there. "Your father wanted you to always have a place to come home to," I said quietly. "He didn't mean for me to disappear from it." Ryan leaned forward, his tone clipped. "You can't just kick us out. We've made that house ours." "I'm not kicking anyone out," I said. "I gave notice. Legally. Through the property office. You have 60 days to find somewhere new." Lila's voice cracked. "How could you do this?" "After everything I could ask the same," I replied. Though there was no anger in my words, I reached across the table, resting my hand over the document. "I'm not punishing you, Lila. I'm protecting myself." For a long time, no one spoke. Ryan stood stiffly, then muttered something under his breath and walked out, the door closing hard behind him. Lila stayed. Her mascara had started to smudge, and her hands shook as she folded the paper back along its creases. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "I know," I said, "but you did, and now I'm just taking care of what's left." She nodded faintly, eyes fixed on the floor. When she finally turned to leave, the house felt impossibly still. I watched her walk down the porch steps toward Ryan's waiting car. The engine started, and the sound faded down the street. In its place, the evening cicadas began to sing. Chapter 8, The Quiet Goodbye. I began packing the next morning. The house echoed with the sound of cardboard and tape, every drawer opening like a small farewell. I didn't rush. Each item I touched seemed to carry its own weight, a lifetime of Sunday dinners, birthdays, and quiet evenings when it was just Lila and me against the world. By noon, the air smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner. I stacked the last box near the door and walked through the rooms one more time. The living room, where Daniel's photograph still hung, caught the afternoon light in a way that made the glass shimmer. I thought about taking it down but decided to leave it. The next tenants wouldn't know his name. But somehow, I liked the idea of him watching over the house a little longer. In Lila's old bedroom, I found the keys she'd used in college, a small brass ring with a faded blue tag that read, "Home." I set them on the kitchen counter beside a note with the forwarding address for the new property manager. When the movers arrived, they worked quietly, respectful of the silence that hung between the walls. I didn't tell them this was my daughter's house. It was easier to let them believe I was just another woman starting over. By evening, the truck was loaded. The sky turned lavender over the marsh as I locked the front door for the last time. On the porch, I paused and looked at the lamp Daniel had installed decades ago, the same one I used to leave on when Lila came home late from high school dances. I flipped the switch. The soft light glowed against the growing dusk. "This light isn't for waiting anymore," I whispered. "It's for peace." Then I stepped down the porch steps, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes, and didn't look back. The apartment overlooked the Savannah River, small but bright, with morning light spilling through gauzy curtains. I filled it slowly, a second-hand table, a shelf for books, a few plants on the balcony. Every corner felt like mine, unshared, uncomplicated. 2 weeks after moving in, I started volunteering at the library downtown. The scent of old paper and quiet voices felt like coming home. Some afternoons, I helped children choose their first books. Their laughter filled the aisles in a way that eased something inside me. My neighbor, Mrs. Clay, often knocked on my door around sunset with 2 cups of tea. We'd sit on the balcony, talking about gardens and the weather, letting the soft wind braid through our words. Days passed gently, marked not by what I'd lost, but by what I'd begun to regain: sleep, laughter, stillness. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like someone's mother or widow. I just felt like Eleanor, and that was enough. 6 months passed before I saw her handwriting again. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, thin and carefully addressed, the kind of letter written by someone afraid of saying too much. I sat at the kitchen table, the river glinting through the window, and opened it slowly. "Mom," it began, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know I finally understand what I did. I thought growing up meant moving on, but all I did was leave behind the one person who never left me. I'm sorry for the silence, for the photo, for pretending you didn't matter. You always did. I just couldn't see it then." The words blurred for a moment, but not from tears. I felt something softer, quieter, a kind of peace that didn't need to be spoken. I folded the letter carefully and set it beside my coffee cup. Outside, the wind carried the scent of salt and wisteria through the open window. I smiled to myself, tracing the rim of the mug with my thumb. I didn't disappear. I whispered. I finally appeared.